Hello and welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be joining us from. Jason and I are actually rarely, but this time live together in the same room. We're coming to you from VeeamON 2024 from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It's nice and warm here, enjoying the sand, enjoying the sun. Want to be sure to give a shout out to everyone that might be joining us in person, but if you're not, VeeamON 2024 also has a remote experience, a view from home, view from work experience, so be sure to check out all of those sessions. Jason, we want to double click in this episode on our flagship research, the Data Protection Trends Report. It is the largest in the history of our space. In some cases, we've got data points that actually total 17,000 global responses. And Jason, this is not a Veeam commercial. These aren't just Veeam customers. In fact, Veeam typically represents far less than 6-7% of all of our responses. Coming to you globally, 28 countries, multiple verticals, different company sizes. Nobody knew Veeam was asking these questions. Jason, we've done everything we can to try to make this as accurate of a capture of the current sentiment of the data protection industry as we can, haven't we?
We have. So the whole idea is, let's say, for example, I use 12% as a rough number. Let's say that we have 12% of market share overall. As much as I want to know that we're going to delight and continue to serve those 12%, I really want to know what the other 88% of organizations want out of data protection. What are they trying to accomplish, right? So are we building the right things? Are we delivering the right kinds of services? And so we use this research for product strategy, for features to build, and we use it for go-to-market. Hopefully you'll use it to start new conversations, right? So there are so many different stakeholders that are involved in data protection strategy, from C-level stakeholders through business stakeholders, the backup admin, IT ops, SecOps, DevOps, I mean, every ops, right? I mean, they're all in there. So hopefully this creates some fresh conversations along the way. We do this for free every year. You don't need a subscription in order to get this data out. So Dave, with that in mind, how about we lean into the first data point and talk about what's going on in the landscape that we need to be protecting and providing resiliency for.
Yeah, if we think about backup, we've got to think about what it is that we're actually looking to protect in production. And every year we like to take a look at where is production. And what it really turns out to see, and I'll let you break it down, Jason, is production isn't in just one place, is it?
No, you know, when you and I first started, everything was always in the data center, right? Brick, mortar, raised floor, network underneath, and cooling. That's not where we are, right? So actually 55% still is, right? The data center ain't dead yet. Amen?
Amen.
All right, but that being said, you know, we're the company that's known for VMs, and yet virtualization only actually accounts for around 27% of the average IT infrastructure. In 2024, if you're still running workloads on metal, there's probably a legitimate reason why you're still running workloads on metal. We're not trying to change that. But Dave, I think the most interesting thing is take a look at the 45%, that really blue wedge on that left-hand side, right? 45% of workloads now run in a cloud. Now the difference is, when you and I first started looking at this kind of data, you know how to back up a physical server, you put an agent on it. You know how to back up VM, you get it from the hypervisor. Clouds, plural, IaaS looks different than PaaS, looks different than SaaS. Each SaaS looks different from each other. Almost half of all workloads are now clouded.
Yeah, what I love about this is it really shows why it's important to have a generalized protection strategy, meaning something that can handle not only a variety of workloads, but a variety of different environments.
Yep.
And you know, one of the things we like to point out is in the pandemic 2020, that's when we saw a big shift in this mix. Organizations really had a huge desire to go and burst, in many cases exploit SaaS-based services,
Yep.
or move to the cloud. But in some cases, we see data movement, data repatriation taking place. So
sure.
This mix looks a bit diverse, but it also can change underneath it. Even if, for example, that 27% virtual on-prem remains 27, the machines that and workloads that represent that 27% could be shifting under that. So in other words, we have to solve for everything.
The best way to do a migration is to recover from your backup. That way that you know that you have that. So I love what we do from a transformation perspective.
Outstanding. Let's take a look at another key data point here. This is one of the ones that Jason and I always love taking a look at. It is really about, what's your, I'll call it a temperature reading.
Sure.
Meaning we don't actually think that 54% exactly of the market in this case is going to switch their intentions, but it's nonetheless, it's sort of a temperature gauge. It's a barometric reading on what is the current view,
Yeah.
shall we say. And so maybe walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, so the question was, what's the likelihood that you're going to change backup solutions over the next 12 months? Now, we're 6 months into the year, right? So assuming about half of them have already made that choice. But here's the fun part. We're not saying on December 31st, 54% of organizations will have switched. What we are saying though is 54%, you and I are both car people in other lives, right? So 54% of people will go into a car dealership this year. They may not all buy, but at least 54% are going to walk in the door and look around. And the other way to look at that, by the way, is only 27% said, yeah, I don't plan on going. So that still leaves about 1 in 5 folks that they're driving by, it's a nice Saturday afternoon, good day for a drive, they might stick their nose in anyway. So there's a high interest in change. And candidly, that last data point we had around hybridity and fluidity and mobility and freedom, right? I think is a primary driver why so many organizations are looking to change.
Yeah, I love that notion, and just the fact that it's roughly 1 out of 4 really are expressing a strong intention not to do something, not to change in this regard. It really is a nice myth bust on the whole notion
Oh, yeah.
that nobody switches backup providers, which we know is not true because we've seen share shift happen over time. We've seen the former number 1 in marketplace, now number 3 in marketplace. Veeam has risen from, I remember when I was first started tracking Veeam, they were number 9 in the marketplace, now number 1. So share shift does happen. And speaking of that, I love the left-hand side. It's like the money hand slide, if you will. It's the 92% say that their data protection budgets are increasing.
Yep.
So not only is there some intent here, Jason, but there's the ability to actually follow through on that at 92%. And in fact, when the budgets are increasing over 9 out of 10 times, it's pretty healthy. It's 6.5% plus, 6.6% exactly, but over 6.5%, which is higher than what we see from a lot of data center spend, particularly data center software spend. So we're establishing some intent, I'll call it dissatisfaction,
Yep.
that's allowing this to be in play, and they've got the money to go do it. Let's follow up then on what might be actually the catalyst for this.
Yeah. By the way, I will say this. The number one reason why someone doesn't go into a car dealership is because they say, oh, we can't afford this. The fact that 9 out of 10 organizations are seeing more budget in data protection year over year, and in fact it's disproportionately higher than overall IT spend, means, okay, so maybe we could afford a few extra dollars on this month's paycheck, right? So I love that. I mean, that is not the gate. The gate is we got to solve the problem. So let's take a look at that.
Nice.
So this question, Dave, I think in both of our analyst lives as well as now, we have been asking this question for as long as I've been watching the market, which is, why would you change? Right? That is the bottom line answer is, which of the following would drive your organization to change its primary backup solution? Right? Now, the long lines that you see, and I know it's a little bit of an eye chart, so that's a good reason to download that report, right? QR code in the upper right-hand corner. It is an eye chart, but the long lines are they could choose all that apply, and then the short lines are choose the one most important reason. We've stacked it by most important. Dave, I think it's, I don't know, condemning, endemic, however you want to call it, the fact that that the most common and the most important reasons to change is to improve the reliability of backups. That seems crazy in 2024, and yet if you look at it clearly, it's actually kind of obvious.
Yeah, it really is, because I always like to point out that recovery starts once you capture the data. That's the key fundamental step. So being able to ingest the data or go capture the data in the first place, if you can't meet your backup window, if you can't ingest the data, then you've got no ability then to be able to do recovery or instant restore, or even put up something like a sandbox for testing, for clean room verification. You've got to go and get the data. So it's not so much, in my mind, a negative statement on the backup industry. It's really more of an issue of it's more and more difficult to try to get a good copy of all of this data that lives in a variety of different areas. As we pointed out, it could
Oh
be
yeah.
on-prem physical, on-prem virtual, could be in the cloud, it could be in flight, moving like you pointed out, Jason. So the fact that it's improved reliability isn't too much of a surprise, but it also shows why there would be such strong interest in switching solutions, because if you can't ingest the data or be able to get that reliable data inside of the backup repository, you can't do all the other downstream things.
Yeah, you brought up a couple really good points, but I want to hammer home on the heterogeneity that we see in the environments, right? So, you know, when you and I first started watching backup, we were mostly in physical servers. Virtualization was part of it, right? But today, there's not a single gold standard for what does IT look like, right? It used to be there were blades or there was hyperconverged infrastructure, but it was all virtual, and Veeam won that war, right? For 10 years or more, we were the dominant player in the virtualization-centric space. That's still a core area of strength for us. But today, it's, okay, which clouds? And not just clouds as in lowercase c, but IaaS, and PaaS, and SaaS, and each one of them requires their own secret sauce to back up. That's hard, right? Let's be really clear. That is hard to do across all those workloads. Veeam makes it easier, but we're not in commercial mode right now. But so certainly reliability is in there as well. I want to point out though that within the top 5, 2 of the top 5 also have to do specifically with cyber. Right, so the idea of what else would drive your organization change backups, integrating cyber detection technologies and modern technologies as part of backup, as well as hardening the repository. So if you do not have a hardenable or an integrate-able for cyber solution for backup, that is a primary goal of change. And in fact, if you add the 2 most importance for those 2 up, it's actually even slightly higher than the reliability number. It actually collectively becomes the number 1 is got to be cyber integrated and has to be reliable, and I don't think that's an accident.
Good point, good point. Well, let's tee up our next data point here, which, you know, we've looked at why people might be changing, and before that, the fact that there is an interest in people changing.
Yep.
Now, what does it mean to go and look at a quote-unquote modern or very capable solution? I think this one's interesting as well. I love how you've color-coded this.
Thank you. Yeah, so certainly the top one is you cannot have an IT conversation in 2024 without talking about cyber, right? So we've got that in gold on the top of the line. See manageability being interesting in there, right? So that's around sprawl, that includes orchestration, that includes a little bit of reuse. We see those in orange. But Dave, take a look at the blue, right? If we add up the 4 different blue wedges, you get 41% believe that a modern data protection means it's cloudified. Can I use that term, right? So the idea of I want to be able to protect IaaS and SaaS, the idea that I want to be able to leverage cloud as a repository. Dave, my favorite, and we've talked a little bit about this already, my favorite is the ability to move from one cloud to another, right? I think that's such a powerful thing that so many folks underestimate. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I love all of these. You know, I love the manageability aspect, and I really like the fact that it's showing that backup does not exist as an island.
Yep.
It's got to go integrate with the rest of the data center, the rest of the business, if you will. So it's not something that's off to the side anymore. If we go back decades ago, backup wasn't even considered a core element of disaster recovery. Now we've come a long, long way to where backup is very much integrated with not only DR and all of availability, but your cyber incident response plans.
Yep.
And I know you're going to touch on that later this week
Yep.
here at the event, going through some research we're actually going to unveil tomorrow, our ransomware trends for 2024. But if you look at all of this, it's just showing that backup has to play well with the rest of the entire ecosystem, the entire environment.
Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the journey, right? So we've talked about the landscape. It's hybrid, it's heterogeneous across platforms. We've talked about there's an interest in change, what they're changing to, and this is what they're looking for. Let's change gears a little bit, because everything we've said so far has been so aspirational, right? So it's like, we're going to the clouds, we want to make sure backup is there. And by the way, I have been quoted on this for more years than I want to count, but whenever you modernize production, You have to modernize protection, and that's what we see in all the data so far. But there's also this other looming threat out there. We talked a little bit about cyber, but Dave, I think the most powerful thing about this is cyber is not the only thing to solve for.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I oftentimes think we could take this slide and we could say, why do we care about backup this year? In this case, why do we care about backup in 2024? And it's exactly this chart. And if you look at the entire readout of it, what you see is there's not just one thing that you have to go and answer, meaning it's not just networking, or it's not just server availability, storage availability, configurations, or anything. Everything that we're used to worrying about going wrong in the data center, unfortunately, still goes wrong. I mean, we've tried to make huge improvements in things like redundant power supplies, improved mean time to failure componentry, but yet what we still see is configuration issues, issues in various domains still occur. So when we look at this and kind of break this down, what this is saying is over the last 3 years, pick all of the things that unexpectedly took down your server, mean unplanned outages.
Yep.
And go ahead and tick that box. That's the long blue bars. And then we also stack ranked by what was the #1 most impactful, and those were the 3 smaller bars. So what you actually, if you're quick on your algebra, what you notice is it's on average at least 2 things take down your server in this time frame. So you've got to solve for all the issues that we're used to worrying about. But to your point, Jason, now cyber rises to the top in terms of the most impactful as well as the most common. But oh, by the way, you've got to worry about everything else too.
Yeah, we've been asking this one question for the last 4 years running, and I think when we chart this next year, we're going to have to find a way to simplify it, because 5 little bars underneath is just, that's getting hard to chart. It is, and I'm running out of reds and oranges to use. But I guess the key takeaways here, though, is all those other things that we still have to solve for. There are a few things, by the way, that I thought were kind of interesting to look at. When you look at the nuances for, say, a network outage or an outage of public cloud, the bad actor doesn't necessarily have to take out your servers. They could also just take out your connectivity to servers that are no longer running in your premises is a new scenario that we tested for. The other one that we tested for, which I thought was really interesting, was non-man-made crises, right? So your traditional fire, flood, we've always talked about it, right? We've always guarded it. But I do think it's interesting. Yes, I'm happy that it's near the bottom of the list, and yet a decent number of organizations suffered it. 1 in 4 had some kind of a weather-related crisis. 6% said it was the most cataclysmic event that they had, right? So, I'm in Texas, right? So we are in tornado season right now. Actually, we're in Florida now, so hurricane season's got to be right around the corner. I mean, weather still happens, right? And I do think there's some interesting myth busts on that one as well.
Excellent. So far we've established that people are displaying some kind of unhappiness, concern with their protection solution. They've got budget to change. What's driving them to change is, maybe make sure that they capture the data. They want to make sure that it plays well with the rest of their ecosystem, and including cyber, which we're pointing out here. What's next?
So I used to say the most important part of any disaster recovery plan is an updated resume, right? Now it turns out that you don't actually need a disaster in order to motivate you to change jobs. In fact, one of the new questions that was actually asked this year was, how likely are you to change jobs over the next 12 months, right? And Dave, 47%, right? And I don't know, maybe we should have colored that red instead of orange, but nearly half of folks intend to change jobs outside their current org. Now, you could interpret org meaning team. I think most people are going to interpret it as company. 47% are intending to change jobs. Right now, there's 3 things I think we should unpack on this, and we've kind of unpacked those on the left-hand side. There's a lot more commentary in the report. Again, hit that QR code in that upper right-hand corner to go for that. But let's talk about the 3 concerns, right? So from a caution perspective, if you're counting on the smartest person in the room being there on your worst day, right? So cyber, DR, whatever that is, 47% of the time, that person may be the one gone, right? So there's a huge potential for a skill gap even worse than normal. There's also an opportunity though, and that opportunity is that means 47% of talent is on the street or at least available. So if you don't have skills in cyber, if you don't have skills in traditional disaster recovery, if you can't spell Kubernetes, right? I mean, there's a lot of reasons why. If you're looking for skills, there's a lot of talent that's available to start supporting your bench. And Dave, because you and I are in the data protection business, let's go with risk mitigation. And one of the ways that I think a lot of organizations are going to mitigate risk is by really leaning into global system integrators, into BAS and DRAS providers, into consultants, anyone where they can actually develop some extra bench strength on some of those expertise areas that they can't afford to have on their own staffs. But so 3 massive opportunities there around how the marketplace and the employment place is going to change the market.
Yeah, what I think is fascinating about this one is in a DR scenario, a lot of times we think about what if your primary administrator's not there?
Right.
But that's usually they're not there because something unfortunate has happened to the individual or maybe they're on vacation. But in this case, what if they just up and left?
Right.
What if they quit the organization? What if there is no backfill strategy in place? So it's actually really worse than what we're used to thinking about in terms of what if the talent's not available. So one of the great things that we're seeing over time is what if we've got an issue where we've got a plan for all of the things that we've already gone through here,
Yep.
but we've also got a plan for staffing because as sophisticated as everything is, we don't yet have the ability to run this without the right kind of skill. As you pointed out, many organizations say that they're skill deficient. But I like how you phrased this from an optimistic perspective, a glass half full. If you don't have the skill,
Right.
go take a self-assessment of that. Understand your areas of deficiency, and then go use this as an opportunity to go out and hire some of those people that might be looking. This is a chance actually to upskill your situation, to improve some of the dissatisfaction numbers we've seen about why you might be wanting to switch backup solutions, why you want to go and ensure the solution that you switch to actually does have the qualities that we've seen on this survey that you might be looking for. And by the way, one other thing I love about this research, Jason, why I always say you owe it to yourself to go download this to get educated, these aren't necessarily the right numbers. Your views are the right ones, but this is a great way to have a conversation with your line of business, your management, to understand with your stakeholders, where do we self-assess? Where do we line up with this? Do we agree with it? Do we disagree with it? Whatever the answer is totally acceptable, but try to go get educated in advance so that you can make better decisions. That's really our goal at Veeam for releasing this, isn't it?
Yeah, man, you nailed it, right? You know, on the first slide we talked about the interest in changing, right? And the interest in changing usually comes from you've assessed what you have, you've realized it's inadequate to your current needs, right? And so now you go look at things. The data here says the same thing. You're assessing skills, and either you're gonna buy by hiring staff, or you're going to rent by engaging with some other form of expertise. But I love what you said there, and absolutely that should be the homework, is to assess not only your technologies but also your talents, and then going from there. But yes, this data, we give it away for free, right? The whole idea is to help you have great conversations. This week we've got a lot of data protection folks, we've got some cyber folks, we've got a whole senior executive track, right? And hopefully this creates some conversations for them to go home and talk to their peers on what do we got. So, so that's go download it, right? Yes. Go hit the blogs, hit the live streams, watch our videos. We've covered this earlier, but start some conversations based on data and ask yourself, does this match my environment? If it does, now you know what to do about it. If it doesn't, what are your numbers? What do you need to be solving for? That's hopefully the takeaway.
Yeah, and I should point out that, you know, as Jason mentioned, we've been doing this now for half a decade. Some of these data points represent 17,000 different responses globally from 28 countries. Again, this is not a Veeam commercial. This is industry-wide. It is irrespective of vertical, of company size, country, backup solution, or solutions deployed. It is everything that we can do to try to get an accurate pulse, if you will, of what the current state of the market is. In this case, it's our data protection trends report. Really encourage you to download that. That's our flagship offering that Jason drives. But we double click on that, and we double click on that starting tomorrow in our research around ransomware as well. So as Jason pointed out, this week we've got a lot going on in terms of everything that, something for everyone, I like to say, everything that hopefully every role might be able to gravitate towards, learn something from.
And let's make sure to remember that it's not just about the couple thousand folks that are joining us in person.
Yes.
Right? We've got tens of thousands of folks that are joining us remotely. If you have questions about anything that's in the research overall, Dave, you and I have now, I counted up by the way, this was, Data Protection Trends was our 16th project since we've joined Veeam.
Wow.
Right? And now you came from Gartner, I came from ESG. Our charter from the day that we turned on was, don't forget to be an analyst, right? This data is the right data. You just can't happen to get it almost anywhere else anymore. But this was our 16th. We're going to cover our 17th, which was cloud protection trends this week. This week, so excited, we're going to be debuting our 18th project together, the ransomware trends report. So a lot of good information to share. Someone once said, you owe it to yourself to, I forget how that ends, but.
Go get educated.
There you go.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to check out the rest of the streams coming to you live from Florida this week. And be sure to download this research as well as the research that's going to be debuting tomorrow. Thank you.